The night was cool, and the city lights glimmered against the wet pavement after a light rain. People rushed past with umbrellas, taxis honked in the distance, and the world seemed to move at its usual hurried pace. Yet in the middle of that restless flow, a single sight froze everything in time. On a quiet street corner, beneath the flickering glow of a broken street lamp, an old man sat on the curb, his face buried in his wrinkled hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The world moved on around him, but no one stopped, no one even looked. Except her. From the moment she saw him, her heart clenched. Something about the way he sat, small, defeated, as if the weight of life had finally crushed him, pierced through the noise of the world. She didn't know who he was, why he was there, or what had broken him, but in that instant, she knew she could not keep walking. She had to stop. And that one choice would change everything, for him, and for her. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the power of one small act to change a life, then please like this video, subscribe to our channel, Kindness Tales, and share this story with others who might need a reminder that compassion still exists. And don't forget to comment your thoughts, we love hearing from you. Her name was Claire, a young woman in her late 20s, someone who lived a busy life like everyone else. She worked long hours at a local bookstore, spent evenings helping her mother at home, and rarely had time for herself. That night, she was tired, carrying groceries, her mind full of unfinished tasks. But as she stood in front of that old man, none of her own problems seemed to matter anymore. She slowly approached him, placing her bags gently on the sidewalk, and leaned down. His hair was thin and gray, his clothes worn, his shoes scuffed. His cheeks were streaked with tears that he had tried to wipe away, but more kept falling, betraying his attempt to hide his pain. At first, he didn't notice her. The world had trained him to believe no one cared, and so he didn't expect anyone to stop. But then, a soft hand touched his shoulder, and he lifted his head. His eyes, tired, bloodshot, and filled with sorrow, met hers. It was a moment Claire would never forget. She gently asked if he was all right, but instead of answering, the old man shook his head slowly, as though words would break him further. For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Claire could have left. She could have walked away like everyone else. But she didn't. She sat down beside him, ignoring the cold pavement and the odd glances of strangers passing by. She let the moment breathe, giving him the quiet assurance that he wasn't alone. Finally, his trembling voice broke the silence. He said his name was George. Once upon a time, he had been a proud father, a husband, a man with a home and family. But life had unraveled piece by piece. His wife had passed away years ago, his only son had grown distant after an argument that had never been healed, and he had no one left to turn to. His house had been sold, his savings had run dry, and now, at 72, he found himself wandering the streets with nothing but memories and regrets. That night, his loneliness had overwhelmed him, and the tears came without warning. Claire listened with her whole heart. Every word was like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through her. She couldn't imagine what it felt like to build a life, only to lose everything. She couldn't imagine what it meant to have no hand to hold when the world grew dark. And though she was just a stranger, she felt his pain as though it were her own. In that moment, she made a decision. She helped George stand, picked up her groceries, and invited him to walk with her. At first, he hesitated. He wasn't used to kindness anymore. But something in Claire's sincerity gave him the courage to follow. When they reached her small apartment, she offered him a warm meal. It was nothing extravagant, just soup and bread, but when George ate, it was as if life itself was returning to him. Tears fell again, not from sorrow this time, but from gratitude. Claire gave him clean clothes her late father had left behind, and for the first time in a long time, George felt human again. That night, Claire sat across from him as he told her more about his life. About his youth, his dreams, his mistakes, and the way the years had slipped through his fingers like sand. He spoke of the fight with his son, a foolish disagreement about money and pride, which had grown into years of silence. He spoke of his late wife, how he still saw her face in his dreams, and how waking up each morning was a reminder of her absence. Listening to him, Claire realized that George wasn't just a homeless man on the street, he was someone's father, someone's husband, someone who had once loved and been loved deeply. He was a story interrupted, not yet finished. The days that followed turned into weeks. Claire didn't just feed him and send him away, she made space for him in her life. George began helping around the house, fixing small things that had been broken, carrying groceries, even reading to Claire's mother, who adored his gentle voice. Slowly, he became part of their family, filling a quiet gap they hadn't realized was there. For George, it was as if the world had handed him a second chance at belonging. But life wasn't magically perfect. There were still shadows of the past that weighed on George. He often sat quietly, staring out the window, his thoughts drifting back to his estranged son. Claire noticed the way his eyes softened when he mentioned him, the way he held back tears when he spoke of how much he wished he could apologize. It broke her heart to see him carry that regret, and she knew she had to do something. With George's hesitant permission, Claire began searching for his son. It wasn't easy, years of silence had created a wall. But after many calls, messages, and unanswered attempts, one day, she finally reached him. His name was Michael, and when Claire explained who she was and why she was calling, there was silence on the other end. At first, Michael was cold, his voice sharp with anger. But as Claire gently told him about his father's struggles, about the night she found him crying on the street, something in him cracked. A week later, Michael showed up at Claire's apartment. George almost didn't recognize him at first. The boy he had raised was now a man with lines on his face and guarded eyes. The reunion was tense, fragile, and filled with years of unsaid words. But then, in a trembling voice, George said the words he had been carrying for so long, "I'm sorry." What happened next was something Claire would never forget. Michael's tough exterior broke, and he too began to cry. Father and son embraced, their years of silence dissolving into tears of forgiveness. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was a beginning. From that day forward, George's life changed. Michael began visiting often, bringing his own children along, grandchildren George had never met. The house filled with laughter, warmth, and life again. George was no longer a man abandoned by time, he was a grandfather, a father, a friend. And all of it had begun because one young woman chose not to walk past. Claire often thought back to that night on the street, to the broken figure sitting alone under a flickering light. She realized how close the world had come to losing George's story forever, how easily his life could have ended in loneliness if no one had cared. And she understood something powerful: kindness doesn't have to be grand or complicated. Sometimes, it's as simple as stopping, listening, and saying, "You matter." If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Tales, and share it with others who need hope. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind the world of compassion. And before we end, we have a special request for you. Please comment below with the words, "Kindness lives on," if you believe that even one act of care can change someone's life. Because Claire's choice proved it, one moment of kindness can turn despair into hope, loneliness into family, and strangers into the closest of companions. And sometimes, it even saves a life.